And what is going on, everybody? So, welcome to another episode of the Phillies Top Podcast. We're on episode 13 of this show, where we do all things Phillies baseball, as the description says, post game stuff, the season review and stuff like that. But before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, definitely smash the like button. Also, hit that subscribe button, guys are new, and definitely make sure you ring that notification bell so you guys will not miss any new uploads or want to go live for the stream, like shows like these or my live play-by-plays. You name it, I got it. But with that being said, let's kind of get right into it. So I think so far overall, we're going to give you, before we get into everything else regarding the Phillies as of recent, it's basically going to do like a season in review, something that I want to kind of talk about right now, and especially with this episode. Now, the fact that the Phillies, a lot of times, had been the most mediocre team that has been in the NL East for the last handful of years at this point, the last couple of years. But we just nothing like this team has just nothing but been a 500 team for since that I think after 2015 I think it was, but this is a little bit different. The way this is, like I said, kind of just go back to the other points that I kind of talked about was that obviously with Joe Girardi going into this part of this year. Unfortunately, the Phillies started out really. I mean, you're talking about one of the slowest starts, minus the Cincinnati Reds. But I mean, this is probably one of the other slowest starts that the Phillies have had, and probably like the longest time. Seeing what this team can produce talent-wise. The fact that they were 22-29 in the first 61 games of the season. I mean, you guess you could really put it that way. But the fact that the front office decides to see like, okay, so we were not going anywhere under Joe Girardi, and with the teams in the NL East in the National League East were kind of just somewhat better. Well, other than the Mets, I mean that's probably the other better team that has been most consistent through the entire year. I mean, you can't take away from the Braves and the Marlins. The Marlins is pretty much just going to be the Marlins. There's really nothing too much to it. Yo, what up? But kind of go what I was saying too is that after firing Joe Girardi, I feel like I know if I talked about this before, but this is part of that season review since we're already past that past the halfway point of this towards the end of the year. Now that's something I want to try to at least kind of discuss. Especially what this team has accomplished since then. I mean the fact that they're well above 500. There were some games during this stretch that the Phillies should have won. Don't get me wrong. But, I mean, going back to, like, the Padres series, we took care of business with the Padres. But unfortunately, the downside to that was we lost Bryce Harper on June 25th, which was about more than a couple of months ago. Looking at it now, the fact the Phillies get Bryce Harper back almost 60-plus days later from a thumb injury. And I just feel like what this team really has shown, and this also ties into the Bryce Harper thing too. When Harper went down, a lot of Philly fans, we've seen this time and time again before, that the Phillies have a lot of times collapse because, a guy like Bryce Harper, when he goes down, like that entire team just doesn't want to. And at the time, I was saying exact same thing too, that the Phillies didn't have anybody to step up. Now we actually have those difference makers. Guys like a Brandon Marsh. I mean, Matt Varing, every so often when he really needs to. I mean, you have some guys has been very consistent. I mean, same with Gene Segura since coming off that IL as well, which also helped the Phillies both offensively and defensively. And also too, I mean, even at the trade deadline too, and like I said, also training. Unfortunately, had to give up one of our catching prospects, Logan O'Hoppe, for a guy like Brandon Marsh. But I feel like it's kind of worked out for both sides in terms of. Well, I mean, we don't, like I said, I mean, the only time we'll tell is going to see what's going to go on with O'Hoppe. But with Brandon Marsh coming into Philly, I mean, some Phillies fans had their skepticism on him because he was pretty much known as a defensive center fielder, but he has shown flashes to be a decent and above average hitter in the major leagues. I mean, and it just shows time and time again, like. And not just Brandon Marsh, and we also brought over a guy like Noah Syndergaard while giving up I don't know exactly what kind of gave up a couple guys, but Syndergaard overall has been somewhat productive, but I don't like, and I said this too, like in my last episode of the show, that Syndergaard is not the pitcher as he once was. Now he can still get up there between 95 and 96 on a good day, which is true. But I mean, for a guy that's coming off of Tommy John, which and you know, and I even talked to before the trade deadline, like a couple guys that I wanted, like pitching guys that pitchers you could have gotten on the market, but even though I know Syndergaard was probably the last resort for the Phils, I should say, but the fact that and I was very skeptical of it too, based on the fact that Syndergaard has an injury history, mostly from Tommy John and whatnot, and that was one of my biggest red flags. Is like, what's he going to be like coming back to the National League? Being in the being in the American League for about not even halfway through the year. I mean, not even about 5 or 6 months into the American of this year. But I think it also turns out that Syndergaard, prior to the Phillies loss to the 5-0 loss to the Pirates, when Syndergaard pitches, he actually pitched pretty decently. Now, like kind of going back to what I said, Syndergaard is not the same guy he was like 4 or 5 years ago. Where this was a triple digit flamethrower, but yeah, sorry about that. But other than that, I would still feel like, it's just like this Phillies team has really done a little bit decently under Rob Thompson and this other coaching staff. But before we go any further, I'm going to take a quick commercial break. So bear with me, guys. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Got to take a quick commercial break, but yeah, kind of go back to what I was saying that Syndergaard, like I said, has not been the same guy 4 to 5 years ago. That's flamethrowing guy that was known to throw triple digits. Well, mostly high 90s, low triple digits, occasionally on a good day. But the fact that he can still get there between 95, 96, and and all and that whatnot, and with a complimentary slider and stuff like that, some of these other pitches, that we have not seen from Syndergaard, since getting him acquired. Now, the only downside to Syndergaard, though, he's kind of become known to be hit hard a lot at times, and no times has to. Not the same strikeout pitch, like I said, not the same strikeout pitcher he used to be. And but yeah, I mean that's what we have going on for Syndergaard. But like kind of going with the talk about with Rob Thompson a little bit, is that the fact that this guy has been a bench coach for most of his career, mostly for the Yankees under Joe Girardi's staff, and seeing what he's able to do with this roster that's been kind of constructed ahead of him. Now, I will say too, Thompson has made his share of mistakes. What what manager doesn't make it? Even though he is the interim manager after all. I mean, a lot of times some Phillies fans cannot cut this man some slack based on the fact that no manager is perfect, and not in any days, but unless that's to be otherwise. But looking at it with this way that this roster is going forward, I think after the year, I think the front office needs to start making some change, especially for the personnel standpoint, with the players too. One of them is try to find a way to cut your ties with Zach Eflin. Zach Eflin, I know some people like him. Most has had their share of criticisms against him, and I'm one of those that has been I have low expectations for Eflin, because the fact that he's got decent stuff to be a good 3 to 4 guy in the rotation, but the fact that this man just cannot stay healthy, it hurts the Phils. It really truly does. And that's something that I do not, if I'm the front office and looking at this, I don't want a guy that's been, has an injury history and constantly be, can't be getting hurt. And sometimes it does hurt them a little bit. I mean, and that's another, and I know it's crazy as it's to say, but I feel like Zach Eflin is just one of those guys that's like, we really do not need. We surely don't. Because you really think about it, because I know our farm system hasn't been the best in the last handful of years. I mean, there was only one time last in recent memory that we were like the top 20, top 15, top 20 in the major leagues in terms of farm system. But when was that? When that was the case, that just did not turn out to be the case going forward. Since when Matt Klentak took the reins after Ruben Amaro Jr. And just looking up what this team and some of the guys and some of the other signings that the Phillies have made, especially in this past off season, guy like Dre's Familia, those who have seen my show or watched the video that I put out know the sentiments I had with him. But since DFA him and Herrera has been important. As people, non-baseball things would think, it's like, oh, why would you would think it's like, okay, the way I can describe it, Familia, for those who have seen this show in the last couple of episodes, I have talked down about him, and rightfully so. This dude has costed this team way too many games, and he was really over-relied on. The guy has been very inconsistent. And it just like and it showed that the Mets warned us about what the kind of pitcher we're going to get Familia, but unfortunately, that was what we got. Unfortunately, was his inconsistencies. Like there was going to be a couple nights. Like one night he's going to be good, one night he's going to be bad. And it's a consistent pattern. But most of the time, in the earlier of the season, like it's really cost us a good chunk of games, and that was mostly on the bad end. And Corey Knebel's another guy that's, even though it's on a 1-year deal, I think he was very useful in his new role in terms of not being a closer, because this dude, I just feel like he just really didn't have the closer. I mean, he still got some good stuff, but it's just not the same closer as he used to be during this time with Milwaukee. That's all I'm saying. But I think overall, I think with some of the acquisitions, I think that the Phillies have made, especially in the all season and the trade deadline, I think if I had to guess, if I'm Dombrowski, I'll probably give Syndergaard another chance. Give him another year, see how he does. And even though this is going to be his first, what looks like looks going to be his first full season, but I'm knocking on wood because God forbid, a lot of times we're seeing pitchers getting hurt way too easy nowadays. It's ridiculous. But I think also with Knebel, I say just give him another one more year, but this still keep him the same role as he used to be. And I almost said this too. Even try and let Ross Thompson be the full-time, give this man a full-time job. Now I know he just say he wants to give there's going to be some other people that wants to take a chance at it. But if you really look at the kind of success that this man has really changed this team around, the culture, and has everybody just pretty much clicking on all cylinders, especially at the right time. Where at this point of the year, if we still had Girardi, I wouldn't even be talking about this. We would still be bottom of the division, probably be worse than the Marlins, that's for sure. But the fact that, it took just barely over 60 games to realize that Girardi's coaching style has not been there. Yes, I know most of it's on the players, but and a lot of times I feel like overall, people say, oh, it's not the managers at times, no matter if it's even I've seen, I've seen good teams, very great teams. Take the Yankees, for example, under Aaron Boone, having a great year. But for some reason, when they started having one of the two stretches, the skids, it's like, you would think, it's like, is it, if the players are not executing on what they're supposed to do, or is the manager not communicating and try to help some of these guys get better. And it also applies to what Girardi was pretty much, I would say, was one of the reasons that I would thought that caused him to get fired, because the lack of communication has, if you don't have the communication, that's just horrible. And number two, which is the communication, especially between a player and manager, is crucial, because it's like if a player has certain questions to ask, to a manager, and have the coaching staff to work to try to help to get better. That wasn't the case. I mean, I thought Keller Cobham has done decently as a pitching coach. Bobby Dickerson has done pretty well since bringing him back, because let's be honest, the man should not have left in the first place, but it is what it is. But the fact that Girardi has been known to not just have good communication, And the fact that even had Nick Castellanos, and I'll get to him in just a second, and I share my sentiments with him. Had it had said something about it. It's just, it basically, in other words, it's like where the hell, like there was no, like, Jordan never talked to any of us, or mostly me. So it just shows that sometimes Girardi has been stuck up in his own head sometimes, and that's where I think most of the fan base could agree that Girardi had to go, because they really think about it, because I feel it, and Girardi, and even some of the other players kind of held this team back, but one of the other reasons is that Girardi, like I said, with that communication, that held the team back, and the fact that he was not willing to work with some of these guys, especially these younger guys, like guys like Bryson Stott, Alec Boehm. Well, Boehm's has been pretty consistent, but kind of go with my tie into my point with Stott is that Stott's confidence was at an all-time low. I mean, the fact that you're seeing rookies, under different managers, you're seeing different productions out of them. But when Stott, you had the entire part of the fan base just turning on Stott because it's of his low confidence. It's yeah, and yes, I get it. He's a rookie, but look at the number two. Girardi wants to start consistently play veteran guys, and it's you're not letting this younger guys play, because we're seeing guys at this point. The major leagues is now getting younger. It is what it is. And the fact that kind of going back to what I said. I mean, as soon as Girardi got fired, I mean, it's just Stott's been seeing almost every day playing time. I mean, you still have guys like Segura. Boehm has been better, both offensively and defensively. Well, we all know that he was going to be a good offensively, but the defensive part of the game for Boehm has gotten a lot better. I know there's some moments where that might fall apart in terms of some simple plays, like a simple backhand, or just not executing the simple plays that might show sometimes. And Bobby Dickerson, and from what we see, some of the clips I've been seeing out of Dickerson, is willing to work with these guys to get these guys to where they want to be. Despite the fact that even though the Phillies now are holding a 2.5 game lead over the San Diego Padres, who tonight are being in San Francisco to take on the Giants, which that should be another importance. But the fact that I don't want to talk more about the Padres, but when it comes to the wild card, that's something that I feel like sometimes the Phillies have to take. I feel like if you're a player and just want to check out the wild card, I mean, more power to you, but you got to look at it, especially obviously with, like I said, the Phillies holding the second wild card spot by 2.5 games. Should have been 3 if they didn't drop game 3 over the Pirates, and that's where I will nitpick a little bit with this team a little bit. Sometimes it gets better. Well, not minus the Reds, because they did sweep a 4-game set against the Reds, but the Pirates should have swept them. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. That team the Phillies should have swept the Pirates, but the fact that the offense just went dead for all 9 innings in game 3, that's something that you don't want to see, especially in the come to playoff time, which, let's be real, that should not happen at this time of the year. But like I was saying, that with the playoffs almost, let's be real, right around the corner, we got less than 30 something odd games left, and the fact that you had the Phillies, potentially on the cusp of making the playoffs for the first time in over 10 years, and that's something that's we've been asking for years. It's just what adjustments should this team make? Because, like I said earlier in the show, that this franchise has been mediocre for the last 3 to 4 years. I mean, at times when you think about mediocre, it's there are times when we finish about even 500, so slightly above 500, but we still miss out on the playoffs. That's what has pretty much hurt the Phillies. And knowing that Dombrowski realized that not just firing the manager, there were some other personnel changes that was made. Like I said, DFAing Familia, who like I mentioned has cost this team a good chunk amount of games, I should say. I really can't put a number on the amount of games that he's blown, but the fact that the Phillies realized that we don't need a guy like Familia in this bullpen because you have guys with reliable arms like an Alvarado. Now we got Coonron back. I mean, Knebel, if whenever stays healthy, when healthy, I think he's a reliable arm. Brogdon, even though I do have some hard feelings on him, even though he's got to learn, and this is where I will, and this is a lot of times I will nitpick a lot of pitchers, especially the bullpen guys, because usually bullpen guys will settle with two or three pitches. Like with Brogdon, the fact that he only has like a fastball, a cutter, and a changeup, and that really is really not saying much based on the fact that, and at times it may work. It's going to work in some games, but sometimes if one of those pitches are not working, it's going to bite him in the ass. And we saw that in one of the games that he's pitched, that his cutter was not there. I think it was game 2 of the Pirates season. I think it was. His cutter wasn't there. And that was a cause, not say cause for concern, but that's something that I think Caleb Coughlin and some of the coaches said has to work with him on that. Because he's got to learn how to develop a couple more, like one or two more pitches. Because if you don't have a guy like, the talent Brogdon has is impressive. He's got a good talent to have. Now the thing is, like I said, if his cutter's not working, that's when he all falls apart. Because he pretty much is a changeup cutter combination with an occasional four-seam fastball to go along with it, and that's pretty much about it. And that really hurts Brogdon sometimes if you does not have another pitch to work with. And that's the same thing when a lot of times people picked on Aaron Nola. Stay with a fastball, curveball, changeup combination. But when he starts working with the cutter this past offseason and the offseason prior, tried to perfect it. I mean, it has shown that Nola has another pitch to go to really execute what he wants to do. That's something that I feel like Brogdon needs to take a page out of Nola's book, is learn a new pitch. I mean, the only ones I can think that can really live off doing two pitches. And that's Jose Alvarado. The dude throws 102. You got a 95-mile-an-hour cut, but let's be real, it's a slider, but they listed as a cutter, and that's kind of worked for him. And and that's something that's what made him really effective. And even though prior to that, before this kind of a hot streak that Alvarado's been riding, and y'all, and for those who kind of tuned into the show, kind of understood my sentiments that I had on Jose Alvarado was lack of control and the efficiency. Now, pitch efficiency is another thing that I've been nitpicking on with some pitchers. A guy like Ranger Suarez, sometimes he can do it, and like there are times it's like there's some games I've seen that, and even like go to the past the first inning, if he throws over 20-something pitches in the first inning, usually he'll last on average in that game maybe 5 or 6 innings at the most before we go to the bullpen. Now there are times there's going to be some games where he will throw, let's see, between 9 to 15 pitches, like say in the first inning. Like say if he throws 9 in the first inning, this dude can. I mean, if you looked at what he did last year, that's kind of what he had, was that pitch efficiency. Plus, with a sinker, slider, and a fastball combination that kind of worked with him, and also with the changeup to go along with it. I think that's really kind of what the kind of season he had last year. Now, I think this year, like I said, he has taken a step back. Like I said, he wasn't able to replicate what he did last year. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the problem and there was a problem that ran into it, was a couple times where he has ran into some back issues. Now, as a pitcher, you don't want to do with either back or your UCL injury in there as well. And we've seen time with some of the guys that we got. Like I said, when we got Noah Syndergaard, I had concerns is coming back from his being back from Tommy John, is that going to be something to watch, or is that going to be a cause for concern? Or so like a perfect example, because Syndergaard over time, he was one of the most regarded, probably one of the most watched talent other than DeGrom. During the early years when he was with the Mets, with all the stuff that he's had, between a low triple digits fastball, a good slider, changeup, curveball, and all than that, it's just like never seeing him now learning how to use a sinker, start using a sinker slider combination a lot at this point, at this stage of his career. Now, I will say too, I still feel like he is partially washed based on the fact that due to his injury history. Now, my thing is just like if he didn't really suffer that Tommy John surgery, I still think he could have been a lot better at what he's showing at this point in his age 30 season, which is something that's let's be real. I've been hesitant to really say because with Syndergaard, you don't really, he's like a box of chocolates. You do not you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, even though prior to the Phillies losing Game 3 against the Pirates under Syndergaard, he was pretty much 4-0, and the Phillies were 4-0 behind Syndergaard in his starts, which is crazy enough to say for a guy that's, sometimes pitchers don't really last. Well, depends on who you're asking. I mean, and the fact that this dude had an injury history over time, still being as effective as he is. Yes, I mean, he doesn't still have the triple digits fastball as he used to have like 4 to 5 years ago. And then you have guys like Hoskins. I know a lot of people have credits, some, some feelings towards him. I mean, the fact we can get Harper back too. And then, like I said, going back to what I talked about when Harper went down, the Phillies I'll kind of repeat what I said because going into, especially when Harper came back more than a few games ago, that when he went down on June 25th due to that thumb injury, we thought our season was pretty much over as it was because he's pretty much that vocal leader in that locker room or in that clubhouse, I should say, for those guys. And at the time, we didn't even have guys to step up when you really needed them most, especially this goes dating back to last year. But this year was a little bit different. We had guys, and I think Schwarber or somebody, one of the veteran guys in that clubhouse, one said something. Look, we get it. Harper is going to be out for 60 plus days. We're going to have to step up, and that's. Hey, what up, Mike? What up, Mike? Good shit. But like I was saying, the fact that the Phillies were I think last time I checked, the first 55 games, so they were like 32-20 without Harper. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking and looking at that, it's just like this can't be real. Because for those who do not follow Phillies baseball closely as some of us diehards and not live through it, yeah, I mean Bryce Harper's just one of those guys that's like you cannot risk to lose, and that ruined our season. Now I will say, he just still has that torn UCL, but I still feel like over time, I think overall, I think he's done pretty well as a DH. Yes, I know that, and a lot of people had, myself included, had like Derek Hall, but I think over time, I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to come back up. That's for sure. Because I'm lower to look. I'm thinking about this too, especially with Derek Hall. And I have been very high on this kid. Now, at times, I will nitpick a lot of times in his mechanics because this dude just, I think hopefully Dickerson and some of the other coaching staff can try at least try to teach us some things so we're trying to be a better hitter because number one, his 2-strike approach has been atrocious to say the least. Now, I will say too, this was his first taste in the major league, so I will say too, I'll give him a kind of a slack because of that, but I think that's something he needs to work on going into the off season because if you do not have a decent 2-strike approach, you are going to get eaten alive by some pitchers. Don't get me. I will say that. And you have some of these guys like I said, going back to Bryson Stott. After over time, it's just since having the confidence with this radiance confidence, I should say. Since Girardi has been long gone, that Thompson and the coaching staff were working with Stott, and the fact that learned a thing or two under Harper too, which also helps too for a guy that's another Vegas kid too, which also helps as well. But the fact that Stott's actually having somewhat decent numbers for especially for a Phillies rookie. Hey, got to chase it to a bit of a different background, RQ. That's for sure. But like I was saying too, this team it's crazy enough to see what this team is capable of doing, especially with the talent that they have around them. And just really dig into the mind of what Thompson wants to accomplish. The fact that we have not seen postseason baseball in the last, like I said, it's been 10 long years of seeing postseason baseball in the city of Philadelphia. That's for sure. But if you really think, and the fact that, I know he made some slight moves at the trade deadline, but it has worked out for us. Brandon Marsh, yes, I know a lot of times he's not the greatest hitter, but he has his moments. And has made some decent defensive plays. Now, I know times he's coming back from injury, which that sucked. Matt Vierling, unfortunately, I'm 50 with him because this dude is also inconsistent as hell. Alec Boehm has been, like I said, has been better. I know there are times he has some cold stretches. Yeah, sure. But I think, tying back to the fact that, he criticized himself, saying, I effing hate it here. I hate this place or something like that. And the fact he took that criticism, what seemed to be personal criticism at him, it just seems like that's like that kind of showed that he's, actually helped him mature as a player, in the major leagues. Now, a lot of, like I said, I mean, the other shows that I've done with this show is that Bohm, since coming up in the pandemic in the 60 game 2020 season. Now, a lot of times I will say too, like the numbers I felt like was overinflated because it was a shortened sample. No, at times he has. I mean, you definitely can tell that he has some of his rookie struggles in his first full season in the major leagues. But as the following year and this year, I mean, he's gotten better, especially on the defensive end from what we're seeing. Like I said, Bohm has sometimes will have one of those defensive breakdowns a little bit. If he doesn't really execute, I mean, shit. Like for example, if at times there was a couple instances where he should have made an easy backhand, that's for sure. Which is simple fundamentals. A lot of times players would learn how to feel to your backhand and actually make a solid throw to first. Well, depending on where you're playing, but as a third baseman, that's something that I feel like Bohm has gotten a little bit better at. I mean, but not say little, but has gotten better at over time. And at times too, and the fact that if it's out of his reach, it's like, and the people, and this is where I will nitpick with the fan base a little bit. That still people still give him crap because it's like if he lays out, if it's out of his reach, and there are times, yeah, I mean, what you can do. What's the worst you can do? Now, at times, like he has made some, Gold Glove type of plays, especially on a pick or on one of those weird hops when it hits the lip of the grass. But yeah, I mean, Bohm has been, and the fact that he's, I think right now, I think he's like career high in home runs with 10. I think because I think he has just like the first time he's actually somewhat on a power surge. Now I'll say it's going to take more time for him to develop that power, but the power is there. That's for sure. But I think Bohm realizes like, yeah, he might have some power, but I feel like he's like that traditional contact guy. Something what Gene Segura is, like learns how to actually, and when it comes to runners with runners in scoring position, that's where Bohm is going to excel at. No matter if it's 1 out, 2 outs, or no outs, depending on the situation. Like Bohm has come up clutch in certain situations. I mean, say what you want about Bohm. I mean, this kid is still constantly developing as, with each and every game that he's played. And, having started short, after releasing Didi, because let's be real, most Phillies fans could agree, Didi just was not the guy I would think, for long term, because the dude was just it was a cheap signing, but I really wouldn't say as go too far. Because Didi is how do I describe it? It's basically, a below average player. The overall, that's a very good question. It depends. It depends on the game though. Prior to like making all these moves at the deadline, as much as I really hate to say it, I would say Castellanos, but Castellanos has been on a hot tear as of recently. Now, like I said, I will get into Castellanos, and I have my sentiments on him. Prior to, that's a very good point. At one point, he was the weakest link in this Phillies lineup because of the fact that he could not reach the outside pitches, and that, especially if it's runners scoring position, it hurts them. Now the fact that I feel like, and I said this a lot of times too, and I tweeted this out. Like this dude has to stand closer to the plate, and actually learn how to cover the outside part of the plate, which that's always been the biggest issue for Castellanos. But if it's like middle inside, like he has no problems getting to it. I mean that's something that's you know looking at it from a mechanical standpoint has always been somewhat of a strong suit. Now I think Schwarber is another at one point was a weakest link early in the season, because the dude was just striking out left and right, and at times he still does. But the fact that he's actually the average is not where we want it to be, but at that point I really do not care about the average. It's like how he like even though Carl Schwarber's going to be here for the next 4 years, so it depends on this year how he does. Like say if he finishes like say an above 200 average, like a 4 something slugging and an all base percentage just barely under 400. Like say between some of the 380s between the low and high 380s. I'm okay with that. I think overall I think that's a successful good first season for Schwarber in a Phillies uniform. Now a lot of times I mean Schwarber has his moments, that's for sure. I mean he does have his weaknesses. It's just that the fact and nowadays, like we're seeing teams that are more focused on the long ball, launch angle. And that's where I would say, that I really hate that type of baseball. I really, truly do. Because if you really focus on that, like that's really going to fuck everything up mechanically. And, and a lot of times, when it comes to all of that, I just learned, what pitches to take and what pitches not to take. No, that's where I've shown many times through this entire year, where like why are you taking like especially if it's like a fastball right down the middle, you take that and you don't take a first pitch swing at it, that changes everything. A lot of and if you don't follow baseball better than most of us who are huge baseball fans, you got to realize or have not played the game, you got to realize too, like say no, if it's like if you think there's a borderline, there's a borderline pitch that was should be ball 2, but it goes to like say a 1-1 count. That changes everything because some borderline calls might change the outcome of some games. That's for sure. Well, unless you're not like Angel Hernandez who constantly blows fucking games left and right. Not for the Phillies, but any other team that's has very tremendous amount of issues with them, which that's been well documented. But that's here nor there. But at one point, I would say, going back to answer Steve G's question, at one point was Nick Castellanos in this lineup. This was going prior to before I think Castellanos finally started figuring everything out. Now I will say going forward. Now my thing is like, the fact that people are asking, like, or I've been seeing some questions like, how far do you think the Phillies will go in the playoffs? I'm not going to say. Schwarber's contract, that's a good question because I know it's a 4-year deal. I know that for sure. Let's kind of bring up the because I got to bring up Spot Track, which if you have not checked, if you want to check any of your favorite players' contracts, SpotTrack.com is the best place to check it out. Just to kind of give you an idea of what certain teams are paying certain players. Now, a lot of times it's like, which is an interesting question. Right now it's the 4-year, $79 million deal. So right now he's in his age 29 season, but he won't be a free agent until his age 33. So right now we are paying him, well, with the salary that goes into that. So by 2023 to 2025, it's a $20 million a year salary. But this year it's 19. It's a $19 million flat. But obviously that goes into the paying into the luxury tax to the competitive the tax threshold. But yeah, so it's like next year he'll get paid $20 million. So pretty much, if it was say 40 for 4 years for $80 million, that would be at least 20 a year. So with that, this year he's only getting paid 19. So as the kind of the current of the breakdown of this for Schwarber, since when he signed a 4-year $79 million deal Yeah, 3 years where he's going to get paid 20, which is you get is about 60 million for the next three remaining 3 years on his contract. And that's a very good point too. Like, and people think it's like it's just like you're seeing guys nowadays like you're getting these massive contracts, but knowing what Schwarber is and following what this guy has done throughout his career. I mean, the fact that who could say came back from a gruesome a knee injury, comes back and probably has one of the biggest moments in World Series history. And I know there's probably been some other bigger moments, but just not like a comeback story like Schwarber, like was taken out early April and decides and comes back really healthy, even though I think say 95% healthy. But yeah, it's just Schwarber. I think overall it's a very cheap deal. Nick Castellanos is another one that's been and kind of like, and I did share, and like I said, I do have my share doubts of Castellanos, that's for sure. But I think overall, how this team has pretty much accomplished or did what they did to really right the ship after, it's been what 5-6 years of mediocrity. We're finally the first time we have not been over multiple games over 500 in since 2011. So that should tell you it's been a long time since we made the playoffs, and it's been a long time since we've ever been way over above 500. That's for sure. No, I still think this year it's definitely going to come down to the Braves and Mets for the division. That's pretty much been given the last 3 to 4 years. But looking at what this team is going forward and what kind of changes they could definitely do in the all season, I still feel like we're a bit off from being a division contender. Based on the fact that yes, we don't have the talent. I mean, yes, we have good talent, but we don't have like the talent. Look what the Mets are doing. You have guys like Pete Alonso, Pete Alonso, Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, Eduardo Escobar for me, I feel like it's kind of washed. I just don't feel like he's not the same player as he used to be. Tomasino has been very underrated for the Mets, that's for sure. When it comes, but you got some guys in that lineup that can really do damage and really help the Mets win games. We've seen that, and they got the pitching staff to back that up too. Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, Chris Bassett. I was thinking Tyler McGill, but I don't know if he's even back yet. And you have a couple guys. I don't think. Well, see, that's a tough part though. I don't know if the Phillies will ever get one. Because they've been there since 2004. It's crazy, as crazy as it sounds. I think the only one that's getting a new arena is the Sixers. But I'm not entirely too sure. I don't know. I've never ever thought. I mean, the only thing from what I've been hearing, that they're going to make some changes to the stadium, like obviously get some better video boards. That's for sure. That's for sure. But I don't think. I think the only thing that's going to be going is the naming rights, because obviously with the as you can tell by the background, you see that's in a lot of the press conferences and shit like that. But it's right now the Citizens Bank's pretty much their main. Where they're pretty much their main sponsor in terms of their naming rights. Now, I actually was reading this article, and this actually, I know this was an old one. This was put back out in early June 2nd. Yo, what up, Eddie? What's good? Welcome. But like I said, the last time, because so the question was brought to a lot of some, in this article. According to the Ben from June 2nd, 2022, that the Citizens Bank's naming right to the Phillies ballpark will expire after 2028. So we still got another 6 years before that happens. Now, it's just looking at and that's going to be crazy to just think about Walmart, because one name I thought that was pitched was Wawa Park. because if you have not lived on the East Coast and you don't know what wobble is, um, I would suggest you're missing out because because we got some good stuff. So this naming reel has agreed to Jesus Christ. So back in 2003, when this new stadium was put up even though before the first game opened up in 2004, so it's just that the Citizens Bank had agreed to a 25-year, $95 million deal for the naming rights to the Philly Stadium. At the time, this was a year after let's be real, imploding Veterans Stadium, and and the fact that most of y'all don't know what Veterans Stadium is. Some of you guys might be a little bit young, but yeah, it's like that's pretty much where we held. Well, this is also dates back to before Lincoln Financial Field got when the Eagles got their stadium. Because you really think about it, because the Eagles and the Phillies share one stadium. That was Veterans Stadium back in the day, back in the early 2000s. But this deal is set to expire after 2028. So now, as crazy as it sounds, because we call it the bank. That's always one of our better nicknames we have. Nicknames we have for the ballpark. But looking at the fact that it's going to end in 2028, which is we got another 5 years after that, after when this new year approaches. But looking forward to after all of that, I'm really impressed with what this Phillies team has accomplished, especially this year. Like I said, after a slow start, to the 2022 season, prior to all this lockout bullshit that was happening for all 30 major league teams, and the fact that you have guys just really, or this team, and this time we actually have guys that actually are willing to step up, especially if one guy goes down, we have another guy that can step up. One guy I can think of is and there are times when some guys had down years. JT. JT Realmuto also is someone having a decent year, but if you look back earlier in the season, it was a tremendous down year for JT. Now we kind of thought it's just is his age finally catching up to him, or is there anything else going on? And we did make a trade to get Garrett Stubbs as our backup, because prior to Stubbs being our backup was Andrew Knapp, and Andrew Knapp was a much below average catcher, in terms of offensive production. No, I will say too, I don't really have no hard feelings towards Andrew Knapp, but Andrew Knapp had his moments. The fact that this man took Jacob deGrom deep, even though I know, and at the time, the Phillies do want him going to lose in that game, but you can't really say, and deGrom is a hard person to take deep. We've seen that time and time again with deGrom. 100 plus mile an hour fastball and the 90 plus mile an hour slider in your back pocket, you can't hit that. But like I said, I know that's kind of irrelevant. But looking at what this team has done, especially since, after the All-Star break, I know that was the worst thing to do. If you're coming out of the All-Star break, no matter what team it is, you should at least give 1 or 2 days off. At least try to get everything back in order after the All-Star festivities. That's my biggest nitpick. And that's what happened with the Phils when they played the Cubs. Unfortunately, they get swept by the Cubs. That was very frustrating. But some Phillies fans like myself realizing, they're just coming out of the All-Star break. They had no time to rest and get stuff, re-energized, and that really hurts them. And looking at what this team has done since then, it's been nothing short of a miracle. The fact they turned around their season way before the All-Star break, and the fact that they have an opportunity to finally break that 10-year drought, not seeing postseason baseball in a very long time. But looking at now, what do you most might be thinking? What are your expectations going into next year? I think overall, I think the Phillies should build off to go into the next year and try to be somewhat better in terms of how they start. That's for sure, because if you got now, I would say too, if Thompson does what he does now, I would say if you don't fall, if you don't go far in the playoffs, I think overall, looking at that hypothetically, I think I still count that as a successful season in terms of where the Phillies finished, finally breaking that 10-year playoff drought. Now, could they do it again going into next year? if you got to have a new manager on top of him, that could be like a Rob Thompson like kind of type of manager that will let these young kids play. Makes and not try to have Schwarber as a leadoff hitter because we have guys better than him as a leadoff hitter. In terms of the kind of numbers that they put up, I mean, especially with Gene Segura. Even though Gene Segura, we have him in the A spot in certain games, he has some great numbers hitting 8th in the lineup, which is crazy enough to really think about. But I will say I will still have Gene Segura as our leadoff guy because he pretty much knows how to get most of this team started offensively. But Hoskins overall, I'm 50-50 with him. I know this. I think this might be his. Actually, that's because I think next year might be his last year on his contract. I'm not entirely too sure, but how this team has gone on, and and really just turning it around though. In just basically what you're seeing. Now I know a lot of times broadcasters sometimes either shut their mouths when they know how to do it. Does Keith Hernandez anybody remember Keith Hernandez starting to run his mouth? It's like, he doesn't want to do Phillies games because their fundamentals is not. So let me get this straight. So you don't want to do Phillies games because they don't look good fundamentally. You should tell that to the Mets. You should say that to the Mets, who pretty much committed more errors than the Phillies. So that should tell you differences defensively, but offensively, the Mets have most of the NL East by a mile offensively. I think close. Yes, and I think the Phillies and Braves are close second and third, and then you have guys and teams like the Marlins just pretty much the bottom feeders of this division. But that's no longer the case, especially with the way the Marlins look now. Same with the Phils, the Braves, and the Mets. Then the only team that's pretty much now the new bottom feeder, and that's the Washington Nationals. And for those who have discussed, kind of showed my kind of criticized or showed my thoughts on that, just on how bad everything goes. But with the Padres and tied into the Padres, and that's something that's where I think the Phillies have. Sometimes they actually know how to play against good teams like the Mets, the Padres, the Dodgers. We know we played against the Yankees early in the season. We know how to hang in with the best teams. Now, there's some teams that we may have a hard time beating. Now it's the Mets. I will admit that. I mean, the Mets are one of the better teams in the National League East. Now, the entire National League, that remains to be. That could be. You can make the argument that you have teams like the Padres are probably the third best team, and you have the Dodgers, who's pretty much always been the number one team in the National League. And I just feel like, sometimes I just feel like, and this is where it also ties into my last thing before we can head out of here, because I know it's a short episode because there's really nothing much to talk about for Phillies baseball at the moment until the off season, and we'll see what happens after that. But my last thing before we head up out of here is that sometimes baseball fans nowadays just don't know when to be humble, and that's also ties in the Mets fan base too, and those that one group, certain group of Mets fans, that's for sure. It's just like I don't know, but it's just like people got to realize too, like you got to be humble of what your team has done. Like, for example, like I know the Mets, we have a hard time beating Mets. Yes, most of us will admit that for sure. But the fact that you're going to see some of these Mets fans say, "Oh, we fucking own you" and all this shit. Yes, you have the right to talk trash on us, but be humble about it. That's where I'll leave off at that. But I appreciate everybody that's been coming in for another episode of the Phillies Top Podcast. But if you guys are new, definitely smash the like button. Hit that subscribe button, you guys are new. Make sure you have that notification bell turned on so you guys will not miss any of the new upcoming content coming to the channel. Well, with that being said, this is Robert from the Phillies Sports Top Podcast, and I'll see you guys later tonight. Peace out, guys.